All right. Well, it's good to see you all. Feels like it's been too long, right? I'm sore from all the walking we did at Disneyland. It was intense. My kids were like, we went from park to park to park to it was so inefficient, but like it was just what they wanted to do. I was saying earlier, I think I rode Thunder Mountain 4 times, and the Incredicoaster, my daughter was like, can we ride it again? Can we ride it again? Can we ride it again? After like the 4th or 5th time, I was like, I'm feeling sick, Emma. Can we stop riding this? Like just on a loop. And then I had like $50 worth of churros, which is like what, 4 churros maybe? I don't know. They were ridiculously expensive, but worth every penny, right? And there were a million people there, as always. So, anyway, sorry to not be here on Monday, but I did think of you as I was eating my churros. I ate almost a churro for each one of you. I mean, almost. It was like a half a churro for each one. What's that? I don't know if they're different as much as it's a Disneyland churro, right? I think they're more just nostalgic than anything. Like honestly, the Costco churros are probably my favorite churros, or the ones at Del Taco. I know where all the churros are. Like I'm sitting here going like, wow, I sound like I really like churros. I'm much more of a cake fan than churros, but I'll eat them if they're there. I've never turned a churro away. Anyway, I wanted to share a little information about the exam. I hope it went well for you. On my end, it looked like it went really well. A lot of you did fantastically. No, not as well as you would have liked there. Yeah. Yeah. A couple of people had computer issues, but we're able to hopefully fix it, right? So this is kind of where everybody fell. So just so you can kind of see where you were in relationship to everyone. The high score was 100. There were 3 people who got 100%, which is amazing. That makes me very happy. There were a lot of A's. Which is great, right? And as I would hope, since you can do your notes and your book, I expected a lot of you to do really well, and a lot of you did. There was a low score of 46, and then the average was 89.2%, and the average amount of time, 52 minutes. So plenty of time. Most of you finished in well under an hour. Kind of all over the place, right? There were a few that were a little lower, but most of you got A's and B's, a lot of really good scores. So you should be feeling pretty good about that. A lot of you pats on the back. I always like to encourage, and I give the same speech, so I'm sure some of you, I know I've heard it before, but I'd like to encourage you to use this as like a learning opportunity. So if you are happy with how you did, keep doing the same thing, right? Because it's clearly working for you. If you wish you had done a little bit better, we have 2 more exams to go, and they're going to be very similar format. The other 2 exams don't have diagrams on them because we had the anatomy in this unit, but the same style and format. So you'll have a study guide and everything. So just know that you have 2 more, but most of you should be very happy, right? And be in a really good spot. So I don't know, any thoughts or questions, anything related to the test? Hopefully most of you felt good about it. Again, looks like most of you did quite well. So that makes me happy. Yeah.
I don't know if I should do this after, but there was one question I got wrong and I didn't agree with it.
Okay, and that's fine, right?
I get why, but I just got confused because
Sure.
It was the one about male breasts have no true or false, do they have any use to them? And I think I think the it said breasts, or maybe it's I thought it said like nipple, and so I was like, yes, for sex.
Okay.
And then it was wrong.
Okay.
But it's because it's breasts and not specifically that, right?
Well, if you want to go look up because you can go back and look at your attempt. If you want to go find that question, you're welcome to like email me about it and like any thoughts you have about it. That's totally fine. Right. I was always that obnoxious student who would like fight the one I got wrong. Like that was me. Like, so I get it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is I mean,
no, because they don't have when men develop breasts, right, which is called gynecomastia, they don't obviously produce milk in any way because they don't have any kind of glands to do that. They don't produce the hormones to do that. In theory, though, like they could be part of arousal. They could be, used as something to stimulate during like any kind of like sexual activity, but they don't necessarily have like a function or purpose. Yeah, it's more of like a actual like medical condition than anything else. So it's considered pathological, like in the sense that it's like a disorder of sorts, like a medical disorder. That's how it's classified anyway. Yeah, but you're welcome to, if you want to like email me about it, it's fine. No, I'm glad you asked. Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Anything else for now before we go into our next unit? So from here, for this unit, as I kick this aggressively here, sexual orientation, and we'll talk about love, communication, and intimacy, childhood and adult sexuality, and then sexual expression. So those are our next chapters that we have. So it's chapters 11, 3, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we'll start today with orientation, and then we'll go from there. So we'll talk a little bit about what is orientation, what are the different ones, how do we measure it, and then some like societal attitudes and laws and discrimination, and then bisexuality specifically at the end. So when we talk about orientation, this tends to be something that's really oversimplified. Remember that video we watched about gender, that genderbread person? They said that orientation is who you go to bed with, right? And that's part of it, but it's actually quite a bit more than that, right? So your sexual orientation involves sexuality, right? It involves who you're attracted to, who you would like to be physically intimate with, but it's also who you prefer to be around, who you are drawn to emotionally and like cognitively, as well as physically. So there's kind of a few elements to it. It's not as simple as just who you have sex with, right? It's a little bit deeper than that. And in general, what we tend to think of orientation as is these like 3 ones here, but there's a lot of like very fluid orientations, just like gender. This is something that can change constantly. You might define yourself as heterosexual your whole life until you meet somebody and then all of a sudden you're not, right? Or vice versa. So this is something that can actually be very fluid, but we tend to want to put it in boxes just like gender. Okay, so typically when we talk about orientation, we talk about homosexual, heterosexual, and bisexual. Now, I added asexual because this is also one that we sometimes recognize and talk about. So homosexual is when you're attracted to people who are the same sex as you. Homo means like, so the same sex, right? So 2 men or 2 women. Now, stereotypically, we use the word gay for 2 men and lesbian for 2 women, though not everyone uses those terms. So homosexual or gay are kind of more broad terms. Gay is a really interesting word. If you look at like the history of this word, so I'll share this with you. So gay comes from an old French word, guy, G-A. And if you look at the history of this word, it's kind of got like an odd evolution to it. So if you go back to like the 12th century, the word gay meant to be like joyful and carefree. And sometimes people who are a little bit older will still use it in that way. Like it sounds odd to be like, he was very gay, right? Like, and you're saying happy, right? Like carefree, happy, joyful. And then when we go forward a little bit to the 17th century, it kind of took a little bit of a shift. So like 500 years later, instead of happy or joyful, it became associated with immorality. Like you were excessively carefree to the point where you weren't inhibited by any kind of moral restraint. So you were like overly carefree in the way that you dealt with stuff. And then in the 1900s, it started to be associated with sexuality. So we said that you had like a disregard for conventional sexuality. You were so like immoral and carefree, but in relation to your sexuality. So you weren't following the conventions. So the antonym or the opposite of gay is to be straight. Like you follow the straight and narrow, you are on the moral path. So that's where we get the term straight from. If you've wondered like where the gay straight like dichotomy comes from, it comes from kind of the opposite of being immoral or like overly carefree. You were straight and narrow, like following the path. So the word gay has kind of an interesting like history to it, but typically like homosexual could be gay or lesbian, or like queer is another word that's sometimes used, or just any of them together. It depends on the person. Heterosexual, hetero means opposite, right? So you're attracted to the opposite sex. And then bisexual can be either, right? So you are maybe open to or attracted to members of either sex. And then asexual would be someone who has no sexual attraction or desire to anyone, right? And this is actually like a growing orientation, right? Like 10 years ago, we barely talked about it, but more and more people are identifying as asexual. Like they're not interested in relationships, not attracted to anyone, and don't feel any of that like toward anyone at all. So we would define that as asexual. So these tend to be like the traditional ones that we talk about. And as I mentioned, we love to make it like a very concrete category, but this is something that can be very, very complicated. Your orientation is often not as straightforward as we tend to think. And I have kind of a little activity to look at that a little bit more. And then we'll do a Kahoot to vote on some of these people just for kind of for fun. But what I want to do, I want you to get into groups of like 2 to 3 people, and then come grab one sheet per group. And I want you to read through these, and you're going to decide, are they heterosexual, lesbian, gay, or bisexual? You can add asexual as well. It's not on here, but feel free to add it. And you're going to decide, right? You might not all agree, but make your best judgment. Yeah.
I'm curious your thoughts on something.
Sure.
So asexuality, there's been more of it lately. And in the last like 50 years, men's testosterone levels have dropped.
Interesting.
Correlate?
Totally, could be, right? Whether they cause each other or not, who knows? But there seems to be a logical correlation. Testosterone plays a huge role in sexual desire and like how much of a drive you have. So lower levels of testosterone would definitely correlate very often, right, to less of a sex drive. So it could be. It's an interesting thought. I like it. All right, so find a few people, come up and grab a sheet, and then as a group, you're not turning this in, but just decide, do you think they're, which one of these orientations? And then I'm going to put up a Kahoot for you to join when you're ready.
It's very like I'm towards the beginning of this class. There's a servant one of these and it's like really bad. And I started yesterday. My are kind of big, so like I got more water. But that's like super long. So
Like I wasn't on one of the closets.
you have to jump that. You still have a big minimum.
It's like a 5. Yeah. I guess it's more of I get to try to maybe I'm assuming. I don't know what says it.
Can I'm curious.
I mean,
I guess when I'm laughing.
yeah. Or would that still fall in?
We said bye. Oh, bye.
Because it mostly depends on what is. Yeah. For sure. In the gay
When you're done, make sure you.
Yes, I think it is a
Like, yeah, I'm okay. Yeah. You gotta feel the French for my name is you don't have
Alright, so let's take just like another minute. Well, we're not gonna talk about all of those. Everybody join rules control.
No, wait.
Oh, okay. We're like, no, woman.
Please.
Definitely. Oh, we're up to 15. There's 8.
I'm just kidding.
Shame him. I like it. Get him. Ah. All right, so we're only going to do 1, 2, 4, 5. We're going to talk about 5. They're kind of interesting. And I'm going to have you vote, right? So even if you didn't agree with your group, right, you can vote on your own or you can vote how the group voted. It's up to you. But we're going to start with number 1, right? Does anyone want an extra? If you want an extra sheet, you can come grab one unless you can see your sheet and then you're fine. But we're going to start with number 1, right? And then we'll just have you vote on which one you think, and then we can talk about it for a minute. You don't have to be fast for this. Like, it's not a competition. So take your time. Are we ready? Someone ready?
You can start.
Okay. I wrote the code up here for you. Okay. Here we go. Thinking about it. Okay. Where's our volume? That's like the saddest thing ever. Okay. Okay, so number 1. Here we go. Is that what it said? Okay. All right, so the vast majority of you picked lesbian, gay. 1 person picked heterosexual. It was an accident. Okay, you're like, that's what she said. No, I'm just kidding. Why? We're all in agreement here, but why did you pick that? Anyone want to share? Yeah, go for it.
He's not at all interested in pursuing a relationship.
Yeah. Seems pretty clear, right? I would say that's probably the clearest one on here, and then it gets a little trickier from there, right? So this person, right, has had a bunch of relationships with other women, not interested in men, pretty clear cut, right? Identifying as like homosexual or lesbian or gay. Okay, so number 2 is our next one. A man who has had several romantic relationships with women and men, though he strongly prefers relationships with men. Okay, so number 2, let's vote on that. All right, so most of you said bisexual, and then we had 1 person who said lesbian or gay. Thoughts on number 2? Thoughts on this guy? What do you think? Yeah.
It's because it says he strongly prefers relationships with men.
Okay.
So it's not like he's only, like, it's not excluding. It's like, I prefer this, but this is fine too. So it kind of, that word made me think it's still in the middle area.
Okay, so how did you vote?
Bisexual.
Bisexual, okay, because he was fine with either, but prefers men a little bit more. Somebody thought this, you don't have to out yourself here, right? Haha, everyone intended for this chapter, right? But thoughts on somebody said that he identifies as gay. Was it because of the strongly prefers, or any other thoughts on him? Doesn't have to be that one person. Other thoughts? Most of you said bisexual. How many of you at some point were just like, if I don't know, I'm just gonna put bisexual, right? That's really common, right? And we tend to do that too as people, right? Of like, oh, if I'm not sure, bisexual, right? And we'll talk about that when we get to that part of the chapter too. So let's go to number 5 then. A woman who has self-identified as heterosexual all her life, but finds herself sexually attracted to a new female coworker. Okay. Number 5. Well, a little more split. Okay, so we have 4 people who said heterosexual and 13 people who said bisexual. So what do you think about her? Like, why did you vote whatever way you did with her? What do you think? A little more split. Yeah.
I feel like for a woman, it's kind of hard to differentiate between, like, especially if you don't know from a young age that you're like
bisexual or lesbian, it's kind of hard to differentiate romantic relationships versus, or romantic attraction versus a friendship sometimes.
Sure.
Because like a lot of the lines with like straight girls are very blurred. So like maybe she has had romantic attraction, but not quite sexual attraction towards.
Okay, so which way did you vote?
Bisexual.
Okay, because of her, the
Yeah.
feelings that she had. Okay, other thoughts? We don't know a lot, right? Like, I want more information about all these people. I think we can make like a drama out of it, right? But any other like thoughts about her? A lot of you, or at least 4 of you said heterosexual. Any thoughts? I would have voted heterosexual personally, because that's how she self-identifies, right? There's no right or wrong answer here, right? But if she identifies as heterosexual, that's what I'm gonna default to, right? But the fact that she has an attraction is hard to ignore. I'll go back there and then we'll do you. Yeah,
So.
other way around, but that's fine. Go ahead.
There's not a lot of information, like two.
Right, right.
Like, how more clear, but
Sure.
I think that some people, depending on the generation, can identify a certain way heterosexual because they're scared.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was just thinking, just because they identified as heterosexual their whole life doesn't mean that they are.
Right.
So I was just taking the fact that they had that attraction to a woman, but then also not trying to invalidate the heterosexuality. So I was like,
Yeah.
you guys.
I love it though, but you were thinking about like other things that could be in play. It could be that she's just not comfortable identifying differently because it makes her uncomfortable to do so, right? And a lot of people are that way. I identify this way very firmly, right? But there's other stuff there too, right? Did you have a thought as well?
For one, it's just the one female coworker. And
Yeah.
It doesn't say that she's ever had feelings like this before.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I know a lot of straight women that like they can recognize like women are beautiful and awesome. Like sometimes you just like recognize that, but
Yeah.
if she identifies straight.
Okay.
That's what I think.
And that's where it gets tricky, is being attracted to somebody enough to affect your orientation, right? And we might not all agree on it, right? Like, strictly speaking, attraction is part of orientation and should be considered. But like, are you attracted enough that you would pursue it? Or is it just like, oh, they're like attractive? Like, a lot of us can find people attractive and not want to act on it. So it's a kind of up for debate. Yeah.
It's down bisexual. Once you have like those sexual feelings, you're a little fruity at least.
Okay. Okay. So just having those feelings for you would put you into the category of
Like,
bisexual. Yeah.
Not just like
Sure.
Just a little fruity.
Okay. Fruity. Okay. All right. Interesting. I like it. I mean, this is the point though, is that like to some people, attraction is not enough to count. And for others, it is enough to count. Right. And so it gets a little bit messy. Okay. So my favorite one to talk about, number 8, a woman who had a sexual relationship with her college roommate a decade ago, but has since then had sexual relationships only with men. So number 8, let's vote on her. Okay, so 11 of you heterosexual and 3 bisexual. So thoughts on a fictional woman number 8 here? What do we think? Yeah.
If I was I don't know, there's just been as well, but also the definition of bisexual is both, so it's like I don't know, she just is exactly that.
Okay. Sounds good, right? Yeah.
Also sexual because I feel it's very fluid and there's whether she wants she's
Okay. Other thoughts on her? Anything else? Anyone have the thought of like, it's just college, it didn't count at all, right? It's a really common like mentality. It's like, well, she was in college, she was just experimenting. Yeah.
definitely think it's allowed to just like try something like for the first time to see if you actually do like it.
Okay,
And considering that it's been like 10 years and it hasn't been like tried again, I feel like it's a pretty clear sign that, oh, I didn't actually really like that much, but I'm gonna stick to this.
okay,
So it definitely seems like someone that just decided, okay, I'm gonna.
okay. Can I ask a follow-up question? Ready? Okay, just as a follow-up to that, how many times can you experiment? So 1, 3, 2, 4 plus. 4 plus is very liberal. How many times do you experiment with him? Well, some of you are very generous. 92 times, it's all right, that's fine, right? Okay, so 4 of you said 1, only 1 of you said 3, because a very specific number, right? 2, 6 of you, and then 5 of you said 4 plus, right? So it's an interesting thing to think about. Okay, so you experiment once, and maybe it doesn't count, right? But we don't all agree on how many times before it counts, right? Like in my mind, like once is an experiment, twice, 3 times, we're looking at like a pattern here, right? I don't know, maybe the first time didn't go well and you're like, well, I'll try one more time just to see. That one didn't go well, or right? I mean, so it's tricky, right? So a lot of people will say, well, in college, you're experimenting, you're trying to figure out your identity. But if you are doing it repeatedly, is that part of your identity or is it something else, right? There was at the end over here. Yeah.
I answered 2
Okay.
because
I think that's a fair number.
you can have a sexual experience with like say one sex, but just because they're that sex that you're trying to have an experiment with doesn't mean that you're necessarily attracted to. So like
Sure.
you're like, yeah, let me try it out, and then you like try it out with someone who you're like not attracted to. So then obviously it's gonna be like, oh, like I didn't like that, but maybe it's not because of their sex, maybe it's just because you didn't like them.
Sure.
I don't know. I was like, that's like it though. Like
Yeah.
in the past, it was like,
There you go. That's my
but-
hard limit after
Exactly.
2.
I was- but that's-
As you were saying that, all I could think was like, well, like if you had a food that you hadn't tried before, like one bite, you'd be like, I'm not sure. Like I'll try one more bite before I decide, right? Like, just to kind of put that parallel there. And then after 2 bites, I'd be like, yeah, I don't like it. Or I don't know, maybe. So it's just an interesting thing to think about, right? Like, and we're not in agreement here, right? And so again, this is where it gets messy. I don't know, any other thoughts about our experimenter, our college experimenter, or anything else with her? I think she's by far the most interesting of all the people on here, right? And I like to think in my head of like all the drama that could have happened with that one like college roommate experience that clearly didn't go well for her, right? All right, so let's vote on number 9. Not as exciting, but still, let's do number 9. A woman who psychologically, emotionally, and socially prefers the company of women over men, but whose sexual experiences have been exclusively with men. Okay, so number 9. Okay, kind of split, right? So 10 of you said heterosexual, 2 said lesbian or gay, and 5 said bisexual. Any thoughts on her? Why did you vote the way that you voted for her? Yeah.
The only reason I ended up doing bisexual, the only reason I don't know that she would be heterosexual is because like, just because you've only had sex with one sex doesn't mean that that's all you would prefer or be attracted to.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's enough information for me to.
Right.
I thought-
Okay. And maybe like she's attracted to and interested in, but hasn't met the right person yet, right? It kind of sounded like a little bit of what you're saying, like doesn't mean that necessarily isn't interested, just maybe just hasn't had the opportunity. I don't know, any other thoughts with her? Number 9? I feel like we should give these people names. I feel bad numbering them. I'm like, number 9, what do you think about her? I'm like, what about Jessica, number 9? Oh. So any other thoughts with her? Yeah.
I think the two don't have anything to do with each other. Like most of my friends are guys, but we don't want to have sex with each other.
Okay,
So far as I know.
okay. It's as far as you know. I love that you added that at the end. Right, so the psychologically, emotionally, and socially piece separate for you, right? It's interesting because we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. Some of the newer measurements of orientation take that into account. And it's a little bit problematic for some people because just because you enjoy hanging out with them doesn't necessarily mean you want to have sex with them, right? So it's an interesting element to add there. Yeah.
Like, for company of someone.
Sure.
Like, when you're looking for a partner, someone to share your life and background.
Right. So what kind of company are we talking about here? Are we experimenting company or are we just hanging out company, right? It'd be important to know, right? And so again, we obviously don't have like a lot of information. A lot of these are like one sentence, maybe two if we're lucky. But the point with all of that is we tend to think of these as like very clean, neat boxes, and they're just not. Right, for a lot of people. And so when we look at like, how do we categorize these, other people have taken different approaches. Kinsey, remember Kinsey that we talked about back in chapter 2, he believed that orientation existed on a continuum. Okay, so for Kinsey, he said that it was a range between like 0 and 6, right? So you could be exclusively heterosexual, kind of equally, so we would call this bisexual in the middle, all the way to be exclusively homosexual. So he was the first person to say, well, people can exist on like a little bit of a continuum or a spectrum, that you could be somewhere in the middle. Okay, so maybe you are like right here, like I'm predominantly heterosexual, but incidentally, so that could be our college roommate, right? Right here. One incident, if you will, unless we have more than one incident here. But it's interesting. He was the first to say it's more of a spectrum and a continuum. And this is something that has that really kind of changed the perspective on orientation at the time when he proposed it. And so Kinsey and the people before him were talking exclusively about who you had sex with. Okay, that was 100% what dictated your orientation. Now, when we look at current ways of defining this, one of the most current measures is called the Klein Sexual Orientation Grid, or the KSOG, as it's sometimes abbreviated. And when you take this little orientation quiz, it includes a lot of different elements to it. Now, I have a copy of this. I'm going to give it to you to take. I'm not collecting it, so please feel free to be honest. And what's interesting to me is, like, in the past, I feel like people would be really secretive with this. And I've seen that change a little bit over time. Like, it's not as like taboo. So again, scale, there's A through G. And what you'll see on here is A, B, C, D, and E, you're going to measure with one way. And then when you get to the last two, it's a different scale. So just make sure you note that. And then I'll tell you about how we're going to score it so that you can see where your result is. Let me give you a little bit more information and get it out to you so you can look at it. Pretty quick to take. I think it's just an interesting thing to think about, and it has issues, so we'll talk about that after. This is not perfect by any means. Okay. So you're going to be thinking about your past, your present, and your ideal. Okay, they define those for you. Your past is like your life up to about a year ago. Your present is the most recent year, and your ideal is what would you like. So maybe you haven't had an opportunity to do the things you would like to do, and that gives you a chance to kind of think about that. The different variables, they give you a little more information. So like sexual attraction, who are you attracted to, behavior, fantasies, and so on. So the first ones you're going to rate on that scale of 0 to 6 for your past, your present, and ideal. And then the last F and G, you use that second indicator. So I'll give you a few minutes and then I'll tell you how we can score this. finish doing them all, right? And if you're not there, that's totally fine, but I just want to explain. You're gonna add up all of the scores. So there's 21 scores all in total. You're gonna add them all up. And then you divide that total by 21. And it should give you a number between 0 and 6. If it's more than that, you did something wrong, right? So you feel free to use your phone or calculator, mathematically inclined neighbor, whatever you would like. But add up all of your scores, divide it by 21, and it should give you a number between 0 and 6. I'll give you a little bit more time, but just so you know what to do. We'll talk about it because there are some issues with this. And yeah.
So wait, out of all of them?
Yes, so all of these and then divide by something.
What?
So add them all up and then divide that whole number.
Well, I thought that. Just like. I think we can reuse most of the ones.
Oh,
Oh my God, watch it.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's so great to watch you do it, right? All right, is everyone done? Does anyone need more time? Means, okay, so you have a number, like your number should be between 0 and 6. So you can take that number and apply it to the scale, right? So if your number is closer to 0, then you're closer to exclusively heterosexual with no homosexual, right? According to Kinsey, if it's closer to 6, you're farther over here. If it's right around 3, you're directly in the middle. Now, I will share with you that I don't agree with my number. Okay, like I have issues with money. Anyone else feel like you don't agree? Okay, so what are some of the reasons, like what are some issues with this? Because there are issues, yeah.
Like for me, I feel like the class kind of messes up, especially
Yeah.
because like I'm just 18 and you're just like, and you know, like I'm
Yeah.
18, and like so like it's kind of screwed like how I grew up and like
Right.
what I was influenced by. So I feel like it got like
That kind of skewed your numbers a little bit. I would completely agree. That is one thing, right? Maybe your past is weighed as a third of your score, right? And maybe it's your past for a reason, right? Like you tried it, it wasn't your thing, or it was your thing, right? So that could kind of mess up your number a little bit. What else? Yeah.
I think inherently, the fact that sexual orientation is based on your own gender is a little bit silly.
Okay.
Because it's based on what you consider attractive and it's being affected by what gender you are,
Sure.
kind of like makes it a little bit messy. Because as soon as you like go a little bit off the rails from being just in the binary,
Yeah.
you kind of like make it way more complicated as to what is the same gender, what is the opposite gender. So it all gets all kind of weird.
Oh, it totally does, right? It was funny, we had this whole debate. My partner teaches high school English at Royal. And she has a student who is male, but identifies as female. Okay, so with me so far, male, but identifies as female, but is attracted to other men, but identifies as straight because she identifies as female. Okay, and then there's this debate is like, well, is she actually straight because they identify in one way and like who they're, it gets messy the second you start like not, like you said, following with the binary strictly, right? So that might be another thing that really throws it off. Yeah.
I just think in general, it is so complicated.
Yeah.
Like, often we were talking, and I got like a 3.
Uh-huh.
I'm not pushing, but I feel like that fits for me, but at
Sure.
the same time, because like I have dated women and I've dated men, so like I tend to fall like more on the side where I like to date women, but I'm still attracted to men. But
Sure.
at the same time, like in my head, like my ideal like relationship is with a man, just because of like societal like standards, and like I want to be able to have like biological children,
Yeah.
which I understand you can do with like I don't
Sure.
know, I just feel like it's so complicated in general,
Yeah.
and it like I feel like this is like throwing me off, like it's like making me question. So.
And like in a way that's fantastic, and in another way I'm sorry, right? Like I want you to question yourself and think about it, but never let a test decide something for you, ever. Okay, right? So you are who you are. This test, like I don't agree with it. My number is 4.4. Okay, that is like way off in my mind, right? Like so that puts me like right here, right? Like I put myself way over here. Like, you know, and whatever, but like I like to hang out with guys. Like I would prefer the company of like people who are male. Traditionally, like I tend to get along with men better. That really messed up my score, right? So like the fact that like I would prefer socially and like lifestyle preference stuff to hang out with like people who are male really like screwed up my result, right? And so like for me, like I don't agree with my number, right? If we're talking about like who I'm interested in being like intimate with and being in a relationship with, no, right? If we look at like who do I like to hang out with, kind of like we were talking about earlier, like I can hang out with all these guys, I'm not interested in them and they're not interested in me, but we're friends, right? But that counts according to this. And some people think it should count, other people that it shouldn't, right? Can you think of any other like issues, anything else with this that like was like an issue to you, or as you were answering it, you were like, I don't know. Yeah.
Because I'm
Yep.
in the wedding industry.
Uh-huh.
More open.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's such a big figure out.
Sure.
But it just sounds like you're saying sexual orientation is there's a mental side to it and then there's a physical side to it.
Right.
And the two probably
They might not always be the same.
influence each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like they can be the same and they can be different, right? And that's what makes it tricky. And then there are things on here like it has a lot of stuff related to like sex and sexual behavior. But if you haven't had sex with anyone, or how are we defining sex, right? Which could be something different from person to person, right? That might be a very different like behavior from individual to individual, right? Are we saying it's just traditional like male female coitus, which is the technical name for intercourse, right? That no one uses ever, right? Or are we defining like any kind of physical intimacy as sex? So there are problems here, but I wanted you to be thinking about how many elements go into this. Yeah.
Needs to be a much clearer definition for like the mental,
Yeah.
emotional aspect of like how that conversation's been made to play.
Sure.
Because there's a huge difference between like romantic feelings for someone
Yeah.
like platonic.
Right. Right.
That makes a big difference in just.
Yeah, it really does, right? And they're including like your friendship related feelings and who you like to be around as part of your orientation. And there's not a lot of agreement on that. So I just want you to see how messy this is, right? It really is not clear cut, but our society's like, oh, you're gay, you're straight, you're bi, whatever, right? Not necessarily, right? So again, hold on to this. This is yours. I'm not collecting this in any way. And as I said, there are issues with it. And every time I take it, I'm like, oh, I want to like lie on who I like to hang out with because I want my score to be more accurate. But I do think it's interesting to think about, right? And it was interesting when you guys, when you all did your, when you did your research, when you went out and asked people, some people didn't know what gender or orientation was, right? This is something that isn't as like understood, and you could see why, right? Like there isn't even an agreement among the experts about how we're going to measure it. Okay. So where we'll go from here, we'll talk a little bit about what determines our orientation for the last bit that we have together today. I will let you know right off the bat that to date, so as of right now, as of today, there's no biological or social theory that has provided a completely satisfactory explanation of what determines somebody's orientation. we do not know, right? So when people say it's a choice or you're born that way, now I have Lady Gaga in my head, right? Like, I was trying not to get that in there, but now it's there. Great. Hopefully it'll go away soon. My kids are obsessed with her. Like, they're like, we just found this new person. I'm like, she's not new. So we don't know, right? It could be that it's something you're born with already in place, or it could be something that develops over time, or a combination. We really don't know. We've looked at a lot of different things to try and understand this, and we really haven't found a satisfactory explanation. So we look at genetics a lot, right? And there are some interesting correlations. Like, we've done a bunch of twin studies, which are really commonly done in psychology. And gay men tend to have more gay relatives on their mother's side. It's an interesting like correlation that we've noted. But if this were purely a genetic trait, if being like gay or lesbian were purely genetic, it would have died out a long time ago. Why? Why would that be the case? Yeah. Because it's much harder to have kids. Yes. Right. So you can have children, but it's not as simple by any means. Right. So if it were purely genetic, it would have died out. Right. It just would have been something that was like evolutionarily eliminated. Yeah.
But was there like, they found some, like a gene, or was it, you know what I mean?
For
Being.
no, not yet.
Okay.
Right. We have lots of theories that there might be like a gene that like at least potentially expresses itself under certain conditions, but we still don't. Right. We still to date. So not purely genetic, right? Or it would have died out, even though we do see some interesting correlations on like gay male like twin studies. There are some thoughts that it has to do with hormones, like prenatal hormonal influences. Again, correlational, but nothing causal. Birth order. There were a lot of studies done on like people who were later born brothers from the same mother are more likely to be gay. Okay, so it's correlation, but again, it doesn't mean anything necessarily. And we've even looked at physiology. There's lots of studies of like, well, if this finger is longer than this finger and the distance between here and here is longer, then you're more likely to be gay or straight or whatever. Hasn't held up, right? So none of the like biological explanations have been like satisfactory. So then we look to the environment, right? Like, so, okay, if it's not biology, then it's the nurture side, it's the environment. Freud talked about being gay or lesbian as an extreme form of narcissism. So he said, if you are gay, you love someone like yourself. Okay, Freud, you have to love Freud for his ideas, like super controversial, super dated, but he talked a little bit about that. Obviously, there's nothing to support that whatsoever. It was just more a product of the time. Experiences and learning. Okay, so if it were solely due to the experiences and environment and modeling, then anyone who had a straight parent would be straight and a gay parent would be gay. And that's not the case at all, right? Sometimes, but not always. We sometimes talk about social constructions, like people who are gender non-conforming might be more likely to be gay. Sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not, right? My partner, super feminine, super like stereotypical female, right? Doesn't fit her at all. Fits me, right? But like, that's just me, right? So sometimes it fits, sometimes it doesn't. None of these have held up either. Okay, so we truly 100% do not know, right? So anyone who says it's a choice, or you were born that way or whatever, we have nothing to support that yet. Okay, so it's tricky. It's probably some combination of a bunch of factors. And one day we might know, but as of right now, we still don't. Okay. Any other thoughts or anything here? Any questions or thoughts or anything? In terms of statistics are tricky. Okay, there's a lot of things that influence like our statistics on stuff. And when we're talking about orientation statistics, it's really tricky. What are some reasons that we might not have accurate statistics on what like general orientations are? Can you think of any reasons why we might not have like a good statistic? Yeah. Yeah, might not be honest, right? Like you ask me and I don't want to tell you, or I'm not honest about it. That's a great one. Can you think of another reason? This happened to a couple of you. when you were doing your research? Can you think of another reason why? Yeah.
The people. Survey would be more. Honest or.
Okay.
You know, like this.
Yeah.
This type of people. who take the survey.
Sure. So that volunteer like bias a little bit. There's one more really big reason. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you don't know, right? I imagine a lot of you might not be 100% sure what your orientation is. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, because again, it's fluid, right? And so maybe you don't know. If somebody asks you your orientation, you don't know what that is. Like, you might not answer honestly. So we don't tend to have great statistics on this. So based on some national surveys, homosexuality in men is estimated at like 3 to 4%. So 3 to 4 out of like 100. Women, 2 to 3%. And then popular opinion is like 1 in 10, like would identify as gay or lesbian or bisexual. Okay, so interesting, we don't have the best statistics on this, but like those are our best kind of estimates. Yeah. Yeah, right. I think it's 2019. So it's 4 years ago. Yeah. Right. So 1 in 10 people are thought to identify as like gay and lesbian. Traditionally, this doesn't include bisexuality. We add bisexuality, it's probably 1 in 7. Okay, it's a lot higher. Okay, but again, these numbers are really skewed because of things that you just mentioned. And what we'll talk about from here, you know, as members of like a minority group, right? So identifying as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or even asexual, we get at, does kind of put you in a minority group. Right. And there are a lot of like correlates to that, things that people tend to struggle with a little bit as a result of orientation. And so if we look at some like societal attitude stuff, so gay and lesbian individuals tend to face some like marginalization, prejudice, and negative attitudes that are kind of entrenched in our cultural and political systems. Now, this has changed drastically over the years, but it's still definitely something that a lot of people struggle with, right? And so we'll look at some like societal stuff and then some more like psychological stuff. But when we talk about homophobia, right, is homophobia, as it's defined up here, is an irrational fear of homosexuality, the fear of possibly being homosexual yourself, or loathing even toward other people being homosexual, or your possibility of yourself being that way. You can have what's called internalized homophobia, right? So people can have homophobia toward themselves or toward an identity. In 2019, so again, about 4 years ago, 1,279 gay and lesbian individuals were victims of hate crimes in the United States, which resulted in either death or serious injury. So a lot of like hate crimes, offenses or violence or intimidation or vandalism targeting a specific group. Now, there are hate crimes toward any group, right? It could be toward race, it could be toward gender, it could ethnicity, religion. Here we're talking about orientation, but homophobia would be that fear of or discomfort of people who identify as like gay or lesbian or bisexual. And again, it can be toward yourself or toward others. And there are a lot of hate crimes that are committed against people who identify in one of those capacities or one of those orientations. I put together like some examples, and some of them are newer and some of them are older, and there's constantly so many of these, so I tried to like limit it. But if you look at some examples of like hate crimes and like homophobia, like on like a societal level, a couple of them. So some of the more like recent ones would be like the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida would be a really good example of like, and that's not the technical name of it. You're not allowed to talk about gender or orientation in any way. I mean, it's Florida, but like still in Florida, and there's a lot of states that have kind of jumped on that any kind of like talking about orientation or gender is completely not allowed and taboo. There are other elements to it, but that's like the big defining feature. Back in Miami, again in Florida, right, the Pulse nightclub was another one that happened in 2016, where an armed man went in and killed 49 people at a gay club, a gay nightclub. Berea, a big pasta company, right, had a whole thing, it was 2013, right, that what did they say here? I can read it to you. I would never do an advertisement with a homosexual family. If the gays don't like it, they can go eat another brand. This one to me is one that I remember really well. I don't know if any of you remember the Chick-fil-A day, like, this is a big one in our family. Sadly, I've never had Chick-fil-A, so I don't know what I'm missing. Wow, everyone always tells me it's so good, and I'm like, I can't eat there. Like, you have to choose where you eat and where you don't eat, right, in life. But as long as they don't serve chocolate cake, I'm okay. But in 2012, so now we're back like 11 years. Okay, but Chick-fil-A is very anti like gay families, right? Or gay identity in any way. They had a day where all of their profits went toward fighting gay rights. And they had on that day, I wrote it down. They had on average 367 more customers per store that they would have on a typical day. Okay, so people lined up. I lived in Reseda at the time, and there was that one right there on Tampa, that Chick-fil-A right there. And I drove by it, and the line was like all the way out around the corner, like down the street, people lining up to support this, to pay for to donate money for that. So very, very vocal company against gay rights. Really interesting, kind of funny, I guess, if you will. The gay community had a national kiss-in day at Chick-fil-A the following day, just to like try and offset it. So, you know, everyone who identified as like gay or lesbian or bisexual was encouraged to go there the following day and make out in the store, which I thought was hilarious. So we didn't do that, but like a lot of people did. But this was a really big one. It got a lot of attention. This company is very, very vocal about anti-gay rights because they're a very religious company. But this is something that you see a lot, right? There are a lot of like companies and events and shootings and hate. All of these would be kind of like hate crime related that are against this community. There was a hand somewhere over here. Does someone have a, yes?
Like, do you know if they also did like a, like it was like a discount the day?
Oh.
Didn't.
Right, and they went just because it was discounted. I don't, right? But that'd be interesting because that could, I mean, that might drive people in regardless of like, it's just cheaper, so I'm going, right? Yeah, it's interesting. It was just a day that got a lot of like national public attention. But you see like events like this constantly, right? This isn't like an outlier. I just tried to pick a few of them. You also see there's something called a sodomy law. I don't know if you've ever heard this term before. But sodomy laws, thankfully, they're all gone now. But if you look at this chart, all the way up until 2003, the red states would enforce what were called sodomy laws. A sodomy law defines any kind of sexual act that is not meant for procreation as a sex crime. Now, this could apply to anyone, right? Like a gay couple, a straight couple, a bi couple, anyone could be fitting that definition. The precise acts meant by them are rarely spelled out, but the problem was they were very disproportionately enforced for gay couples versus straight couples. And you might wonder, like, how would somebody know that you're engaging in sex with someone? What would happen is people would report their neighbors, report like people that they knew who were in like gay or lesbian relationships, and they could be arrested and thrown in jail, fined up to $10,000, right? And depending on which state you lived in. And some states, right, like the lighter the color, like the longer ago it was repealed. But these were very present for a lot of years, right? A lot of laws to enforce like people not having like sexual relationships with people of the same sex. And they were sometimes enforced for gay couple or straight couples, but it was very disproportionate, like very common. And it comes from the whole like Sodom and Gomorrah, right? The like immoral cities in the Bible, if you've wondered where the term sodomy comes from. But again, another like example of legislation. One more, same-sex marriage. This one's a complicated one, especially in California. California is the only state in the United States to grant same-sex marriage, take it away, and then grant it again, right? We're the only one who's done that. But in 1996, Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act, which was called DOMA. And what that meant was it federally prohibited same-sex couples from getting married and having it be federally recognized. Now, that was overturned in 2015. So in 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that banning same-sex marriage was unconstitutional. So as of 2015, it is legal for people to be married to a same-sex partner federally. But that got challenged again recently with like the all of the like reproductive rights stuff that came up. So in 2022, most recently, we passed what's called the Respect for Marriage Act to safeguard same-sex marriages nationwide because they became under attack after the Roe versus Wade stuff that came up. Interracial marriages and same-sex marriages were starting to be thought about to be challenged, which is wild, especially interracial marriages. We're talking like 50 years ago that was something that was like legally like allowed. But what they put here is that a marriage must be recognized under federal law if it was legal in the state in which it took place. Okay, so even if your state bans same-sex marriage, you have to recognize it federally. And again, in California in 2008, we allowed same-sex marriage, and then we turned it away in 2013, and then it came back. We've gone back and forth in our state. But there's a lot of legislation around marriage between two people who are of the same sex. And it's gone back and forth over the years. And again, where you start to see some of these like correlates taking place and like some of this legislation as well. So as of today, it is legal, but certain states have the right to potentially repeal it and take it back, but it still has to be recognized federally, if that makes sense. Well, lots of complicated stuff. When they made it legal in 2015, my partner and I, we had already gotten married. We had like the most traditional wedding. Like I wore a tux and she wore like you would like think it was like a normal like wedding, right? Like between a man and woman. But we went and got to legally married at the courthouse in Ventura. And our little daughter at the time, she was like 6 months old. She was our witness. It was so cute. We just took her with us. We didn't like get dressed up or anything. Just went and filed the paperwork. And then we had her scribble her little signature. So it's super cute. Our little 6-month-old was our witness at the time. She doesn't remember, obviously, but I remember. All right. I think I'm going to stop there. We have about 5 minutes left, but I'll stop here and then we'll pick up next time looking at some like mental health correlates and then lifestyle behavioral stuff. If you have any like thoughts or questions, I'll hang out for a few minutes. Otherwise, have another wonderful weekend and I will see you on Monday.